Hi, it's Martin, and today I'd like to talk about somebody who is pretty instrumental in a lot of the work that Dorothy Day did. His name is Peter Maurin. You are very likely to say, who the heck is Peter Maurin? Turns out he actually did not meet Dorothy Day until he was about 55 years of age. He was a co-founder with Dorothy Day of the Catholic Worker Movement and is chiefly responsible for the movement's visionary qualities. Very interesting guy. He was born into a peasant family in the Languedoc region of southern France. That's probably one of the largest wine-making industries in all of France, the Languedoc region. He was born on May 9th, 1877. At the age of 16, pretty young, he entered the Christian Brothers, a teaching order which stressed simplicity of life, piety, and service to the poor. That last part of it is particularly important because his whole life was geared for that, service to the poor. In the years of 1898-99, his community life was interrupted by obligatory military service, in the course of which Maurin perceived a tension between religious and political duties. In 1902, when the French government closed many religious schools, Maurin left the order and became active in the Sillon, a Catholic lay movement which advocated Christian democracy and supported cooperatives and unions. In 1908, disenchanted with the movement, increasingly political character, Maurin resigned from the Sillon. In 1909, he immigrated to Canada, where there was no military conscription. For 2 years, he homesteaded in Saskatchewan. After the effort failed, he took whatever work he could find, first in Canada, then in the United States, digging ditches, quarrying stone, harvesting wheat, cutting lumber, and laying track. He worked in brickyards, steel mills, and coal mines. Quite a diversity, huh? At times, he traded French lessons for his necessities. He was jailed for vagrancy and for riding the rails. He never married. In 1932, he was a handyman at a Catholic boy camp in upstate New York, receiving meals, use of the chaplain's library, and living space in a barn. Through his years of reflection and hard labor, Maurin came to embrace poverty as a gift from God. His unencumbered life offered time for study and prayer, out of which a vision had taken form of a social order instilled with basic values of the gospel, in which it would be easier for men to be good. As often as his work allowed, he made his way to New York City, staying in Bowery flophouses. His days were spent either at the public library expounding his ideas to anyone who showed interest. After all, he reasoned, the way to reach the man on the street is to meet the man on the street. He was a born teacher, lively, insightful, and good humor, and found willing listeners, among them George Schuster, editor of Commonweal magazine, who gave him the address of Dorothy Day, a Catholic convert supporting herself as a freelance journalist. Maurin introduced himself to her in December 1932. To many, Maurin would have seemed just one more street corner prophet. Day quickly came to regard him as an answer to her prayers, someone who could help her discover what she was supposed to do. Maurin saw Dorothy Day as a new Catherine of Siena, the medieval reformer and peace negotiator. Maurin believed Day could move mountains and have influence on governments, temporal and spiritual. But first, she needed a truly Catholic education. Maurin wanted her to look at history in a new way, which centered not on the rise and fall of nations but on the lives of saints. She had to understand that sanctity was what really mattered, and that any program of social change must emphasize sanctity and community. Maurin proposed that Day start a newspaper to publicize Catholic social teaching and promote steps to bring about the peaceful transformation of society. Day responded positively, though unsure how she would ever find the money for such a venture. In the history of the saints, Maurin assured her, capital is raised by prayer. God sends you what you need when you need it. You will be able to pay the printer. Just read the lives of the saints. The name Maurin proposed for the paper was a Catholic radical. The radical, from the Latin word radix, meaning root, is someone who doesn't settle for cosmetic solutions. He said, but goes to the root of personal and social problems. Day felt that the name should refer to the class of readers she hoped the paper would have, and so named it The Catholic Worker. Man proposes and woman disposes, Maurin responded meekly. However, when the first issue of the newspaper was ready for distribution on May 1st, 1933, Maurin was disappointed and asked that his name not be included among the list of editors. He found the paper short on ideas, principles, and a strategy for a new social order. Apart from his own blank verse easy essays and a few quotations from the Bible and papal encyclicals, the rest of the paper struck him as just one more journal of radical protest. A radical even among radicals, Maurin thought protest would do little to bring about real change. Strikes don't strike me, he said, arguing that the old order would die from neglect, not censure. What was needed first of all was a vision of a future society, and with this a program of constructive steps with which to begin realizing bits of the vision in one's own life. The Catholic Worker, Maurin said, should not be just one more group of complainers. It should work for what he called the Green Revolution. Maurin was often accused of being a utopian romantic, longing to return to travel backward rather than forward in time. But Day gradually became more open to his critique of assembly line civilization and came to share his view that improved, unionized industrialism wasn't enough, that community was better than mass society. In his Catholic Worker essays, Maurin repeatedly advocated renewal of the ancient Christian practice of hospitality. People who are in need and are not afraid to beg, give to people not in need, the occasion to do good for goodness sake. Modern society calls the beggar bum and panhandler and gives him the bum's rush. But the Greeks used to say that people in need are ambassadors of the gods. Although you may be called bums and panhandlers, you are in fact the ambassadors of God. As God's ambassadors, you should be given food, clothing, and shelter by those who are able to give it. Every home, Maurin said, should have its Christ room, and every parish a house of hospitality, ready to receive the ambassadors of God. Within a year of its founding, the Catholic Worker movement was known as much for its houses of hospitality as for its newspapers. Maurin advocated round-table discussions for the clarification of thought. Friday night meetings quickly became a tradition of the Catholic Worker family. From the founding of the Catholic Worker movement in 1933 until 1944, Peter often traveled speaking in church halls and on street corners to anyone who cared to listen. In 1944, following what appeared to be a minor stroke, Maurin slowly began losing his memory. His last 5 years were lived quietly and humbly at the Catholic Workers' Mary Farm Retreat Center near Newburgh, New York. His death in 1949 was reported by the New York Times and the Vatican newspaper L'Osservatore Romano. Time magazine noted that Maurin was buried in a cast-off suit and consigned to a donated grave, appropriate arrangements for a man who had slept in no bed of his own and worn no suit that someone had not given away. After his death, the Catholic Worker Farm located on Staten Island, New York, was named in his honor. Today, the Peter Maurin Farm continues in Marlborough, New York. On many occasions, Dorothy Day made it quite clear that for her, Peter's spirit and ideas were utterly essential to the rest of her life. She was inspired by his struggle to make the principles of Jesus and the kind of life that he lived, to rescue them from those who had turned him into an icon of Sunday convenience. The Catholic worker movement became their shared initiative. Dorothy Day, mentioned a little bit earlier, kept on asking Peter, how can they start the newspaper without any money? Peter's continued response reveals his particular strength, a faith that had no use for such words as impossible or expensive or unfeasible or unworkable. In the Catholic Church, one never needs money to start a good work. People are what is important. If you have people and they are willing to give their work, that is the thing. God is not to be outdone in generosity. The funds will come in some way or other. Without him, I would never have been able to find a way of working that would have satisfied my conscience. Peter's arrival, she told one author, changed everything. Everything. I finally found a purpose in my life and a teacher that I needed. So, just a little bit about Peter that most people probably don't know about, but he certainly was very important to the Catholic worker movement and also to Dorothy Day, and they worked so well together. So I want to thank you for taking the time, and until the next time, farewell.